Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back for another Monday 80s entry, for one which is not often talked about, which is kind of surprising given that we have the term AI shoved in our faces all the time these days, and one which is also an anniversary revisit for me, as this was the first film I'd made a video for 4 years ago as of this past Saturday, which is for Electric Dreams from 1984, starring Lenny Von Dolen and Virginia Madsen. Now, I'd seen this film a few times back on cable when I was growing up, and I've always had like a nostalgic soft spot in my heart for this one, despite how unrealistic and admittedly cheesy it can seem. I think that's why I began the channel with covering this film, back when I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the channel, what I wanted to focus on, and so on. I even used to assign letter grades for films back then, rather than now with the more simple, I enjoyed this film for these reasons, maybe you will be, maybe you will too. But anyways, the synopsis for this film is as follows. A young man buys a computer that accidentally becomes sentient and begins to turn its affection towards a man's attractive female neighbor. So yeah, this guy is completely disorganized, always running late, and it's suggested that he get one of those little pocket organizers that they had back in the day. Now keep in mind, this is way back when things like that and computers for in-home use in general were still very new, very niche in a way. Anyways, they were out of these organizers when he goes to buy one, so he's talked into getting a full computer. Now, much of what this computer is capable of, such as a lot of this home automation, I don't remember that really existing too much unless it was just a very small market, something more experimental and new in a way. But I even remember getting just a computer mouse separately from my computer back in the 80s. It didn't even come with something as simple as a mouse back then, so the automation seemed a little bit out there. But at any rate, he has his computer controlling everything in his home, and all sorts of high-tech options, many features which we didn't really get until within the past 20 years. Now, aside from organizing, he's using this for work, as he's an architect who wants to develop this earthquake-proof brick, which is fitting as the film takes place in the San Francisco area. So while he's working from home, he dials into the big computer in the office and tries to download pretty much everything that it's got to work on this project. And this is where things really take that sci-fi turn, as his computer freaks out, starts to smoke, is overheating, catching on fire, and he takes this champagne that he has and kind of dumps it all over it to put it out. Now, this eventually leads to the computer, via this overheating and short-circuiting, to kind of become sentient. And since he has a speaker and microphone hooked up, he can even talk to it and hear back. So full voice control and everything. But so anyways, throughout this story, we now have this sentient computer which overhears his neighbor, played by Virginia Madsen, playing her cello, and begins to play along with her. Now she's thinking that this is our lead, named Miles, by the way. She kind of expresses interest in getting to know him, and they begin spending a lot of time together while this computer is kind of falling in love with her, as he's realizing and trying to understand what love is, getting very jealous of Miles, and starts wreaking havoc on his life by dialing out and affecting things like his pager, his credit cards, and even his checking account. It's a very silly and unrealistic film to say the least, but it focuses on Miles falling for his neighbor, who's falling for him, and this computer who's also falling for her as well. But there are a few things which always seem to bring me back to this film from time to time, making it a fun rewatch, such as computers were seen as almost magical back then. It's kind of crazy looking back. You throw a computer into a story and all sorts of stuff could happen, whether it's something like either this film or War Games or Short Circuit or Explorers. It's a fun reminder of how new even having access to a computer was back then. You could really just take a story anywhere, even if so much of it is unrealistic or cringy these days. Most people didn't really have one back then, so there was this suspension of disbelief that it's a lot of fun, grounded in this semi-reality of the time. Second one would be the soundtrack. It's absolutely great. Even stumbled across it on vinyl at a flea market probably 8 years ago. We got some Culture Club, some Paul Oakley, these strange mixes of cello with computer sounds. There are beats within this film, which being an 80s film, and I've seen this a lot back then, they kind of play like a music video. These little montages, with some really great throwback music that kind of move us along in the story. And finally, of course, the nostalgia factor, which is why I know this one may not only not be your cup of tea, precisely, but you may not even like it at all. It's just for myself, this one really takes me back to so many of these smaller, like non-giant blockbuster films. These short, quick, fun films that have often been forgotten over the years. I've got that nostalgia factor that I love checking out. You know, it also shows the way the story was written and what was happening in the 80s. Kind of a bit of a simpler time when people weren't on their phones all the time, since they didn't even have smartphones. You know, you'd be out and about with no ties to anything and really in the moment, connecting with people more one-on-one, and you know, stuff which was new, like this new technology and everything, was a lot more fun and exciting back then. So, you know, exciting and new, you know, so exciting and new that we would get films like these, which, you know, showing this new technology as being, well, understandably amplified and embellished, but also a bit wondrous in many ways. You know, used to add an aspect to a story like this, which ultimately is a love story about a guy and his neighbor, and sadly the heartbreak of this computer that becomes sentient, with beats of comedy thrown throughout it, which of course make this film a lot of fun and more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this quick little 4-year anniversary revisit of the film which started this channel, Electric Dreams from 1984. To the time of this video is available on a lot of streaming places now, such as Fubo, Shout TV, Prime, Roku, Hoopla, Pluto, and Plex. I'm still waiting for a Blu-ray one day, as I would love to see a decent remaster of this, as all I've seen available out there is like a German edition that won't even play in our region, and it's like $50 anyways, which, you know, I like the film, but not for $50. Anyways, thanks not just for coming by and staying around to the end as usual, but especially for any of you new subscribers who've recently come across my channel, as well as those who perhaps have been here since, you know, the early days. That first video 4 years ago, it really flew by. I had weeks where I would just do one video a week, long stretches focusing on one kind of film, such as when I did that whole stream of all those Hammer films years ago. Worked in some new stuff from time to time and so on, so it's always changing. I think right now I'm at a little bit over 350 videos, covering close to 400 films, and I hope to work in more, build up that audience, and cross that 1,000 subscriber mark, which I know I could do quicker if I went negative and found some stuff to trash, but I just don't like doing that. You know, why trash something that isn't for me, and why would I want to spend 2 hours making a video like that anyways? Anyways, thanks again for coming by. That's all I got for this one. Be sure to like and subscribe if you are new, and I will see you in the next one.